South Bronx, where we are now, is this country's poorest congressional district. The river, in many ways, is sort of a womb of habitat, of life and real hope for the larger environmental and social state of the South Bronx.
Last week we went, this week we went on and it was fun.
These people were part of a unique program to transform one of New York's toughest neighbourhoods into a viable, healthy community. The group builds its own boats and uses them to restore the Bronx River, a project designed to develop self-esteem and teamwork and to nurture an interest in the environment.
Oh, this feels nice. Very nice. So smooth.
But what's really unusual is where most of the money comes from to keep the project alive. Although it's based in the heart of one of America's most impoverished areas, the funding comes not from the US government, but from the state oil organization of Venezuela, a company called Citgo.
It's been great. It's a 3-year, $210,000 grant, so it's $70,000 a year. One of the really wonderful benefits is not only is it 70 grand a year, but it's for 3 years.
Huh? I like this program though. It's fun. No, and if I could, I'd tell the whole world about it. Seriously.
The funding of the Bronx River program is just a small part of a larger campaign by the Venezuelan oil company to help some of America's poorest citizens. And they've poured millions of dollars into the South Bronx, supporting social and environmental activists. In a nation that is now strapped for cash because of its military campaigns overseas, community groups in places like the South Bronx are now looking abroad for money.
The U.S. policy is not one that gives a lot of money to social concerns. I think there's a sense that, you know, we are a pick yourself up by your bootstraps kind of a society, and somehow everyone is supposed to do it. And if I can do it, then you can too. And you know, everyone knows where the U.S. has been spending most of its money recently, and it's not here at home.
The Venezuelan funding is the brainchild of Venezuela's outspoken president, Hugo Chavez, a nemesis of the US President George Bush, whom Chavez described in the United Nations as the devil himself. Chavez's love affair with the Bronx started just over 2 years ago, when he visited the area as a guest of the local Democrat congressman. Chavez claims that it is his affinity with America's poor that drives his foreign charity campaign, but his critics say that it's an obvious and failed attempt to embarrass the US government.
No, I don't think he's succeeded. I think people see through it. I think people see it for what it is, a fairly crude propaganda operation.
Jim Roberts is a Latin American specialist with a conservative Washington-based think tank called the Heritage Foundation.
He may have won the propaganda war in the South Bronx, but that South Bronx doesn't speak for the United States. So many people here see through him and see him for what he is, a populist, demagogue, strongman, using other people's money to acquire personal political power and influence and wealth, actually, for himself and his family and his regime.
Anything that brings resources into a community like this without taking away from the community is a good thing.
For activists like Tony Archino, the controversial nature of the funding is a secondary issue.
I understand some of the issues and surrounding having Venezuelan money, but the idea here is the money is being promoted to the community in a lot of different ways, us being one of them, and it's very successful.
People always said, is there a political motivation? And I say, yes. You know, what is a political motivation? To tell people that there is another way of doing things.
According to Venezuela's ambassador to the US, the charity campaign in the South Bronx is meant to demonstrate Venezuela's global commitment to helping the poor.
Even people told us, why are you helping the US? Why are you helping the low-income people or the poor people in the US? And I always told them, what is the difference between a US poor from an equatorial poor or a Venezuelan poor is exactly the same.
In fact, Venezuela's state oil giant Citgo has been extending its charity well beyond the Bronx River.
This year, they're targeting more than 100 million barrels to 16 states.
Causing further embarrassment to the Bush administration, Chavez has started a program through which Citgo provides heavily discounted heating oil to poor residents of the South Bronx. Ambassador Herrera says it's Venezuela's responsibility as a global energy supplier to give something back to those who can least afford it.
You know, our way of thinking is that you help with what you have. We happen to have oil, heating oil in this case, and a different idea of cooperation, a human sense of how we should cooperate among people. This is what we have.
Well, this is our building, 1116 Hoe Avenue. Well, this is where the oil, they put the oil in here. There's a bigger tank, it holds a lot of oil, 4,000 gallons. So we need a lot of oil to fill up that tank.
Gloria Colon heads her building's residence committee in one of the Bronx apartment buildings that is receiving Venezuelan heating oil. Faced with the rising cost of heating fuel, she and the other residents couldn't care less about the politics of the Venezuelan largesse.
No, we'll say, hey, it's somebody's giving us a hand and we're taking it, that's it. That's the way we see it. We don't get involved in the politics of it. We just, you know, we're happy that we got the help because we really needed it.
The South Bronx has a fierce reputation and a troubled history. Along with its large African American population, the Bronx attracts poor immigrant families drawn by cheap housing. And poverty, crime and substance abuse are rife. The New York authorities have been unable to deal with all its problems, and the federal government pays it scant attention. But with the backing of Venezuela, social activists here are determined to transform the area.
I don't know if you've heard of the term, you know, the Bronx is burning. That's because in the 70s and the 80s, what happened was, you know, a lot of these houses would be burnt because of the recession, and people would take the money from the insurance.
With the US economy under strain and huge numbers of housing foreclosures, Steve Oliveira is worried that the Bronx might once again live up to its reputation as a burning ghetto.
You know, hope to God that that doesn't happen here again, you know. That, you know, coupled with, you know, just an influx of more immigrants is just going to be the worst thing to happen to this area, where, you know, immigrants that are trying to get a leg up are finding things even tougher than from where they're from.
In the South Bronx, solid signs of the Venezuelan cash injection are already appearing.
This place was pretty much a dump. What you see is Concrete Plant Park.
The organisation that Steve works for has used Venezuelan money to transform industrial areas from urban eyesores into public parks and green zones. But an even more pressing concern is the declining health of the people who live here. The South Bronx is surrounded by 3 major highways, polluting the area with toxic fumes. Now, with the support of the Venezuelans, a major campaign is being planned to have the highways removed and rerouted well away from the neighbourhood.
The fact that the community of South Bronx is littered and imprisoned by freeways, I mean, you can see by this traffic jam here that,
A lot of these vehicles are diesel vehicles, which contributes to the asthma rate here, which is twice that the national average in the U.S. Add that with the lack of services here, add that with this area being the poorest congressional district in the nation, and you have pretty much a recipe for just economic depression and an area that people forget. What I want to bring you down here for is kind of this mural here discusses the life of Jesus, but in the context of the South Bronx. Right here you can see a lot of the masses which a lot of the community can, identify with.
Steve sincerely believes that it was Chavez's personal empathy with the mostly poor and struggling residents of the South Bronx that led to the Venezuelan funding projects.
I think he identified with the people of color here. We have a heavy Latino population. We have a heavy African American population. I think that's what he identifies with is, the people here that are suffering remind him of the people in Venezuela to a point.
But critics say that the image of Chavez as a liberator for the poor is a false one. Although its oil exports earn the country billions of dollars, many Venezuelans still live in desperate poverty, a fact Jim Roberts says some American activists prefer to ignore.
You'd think that they would say, thanks very much, but actually our 97% of the poor households in the United States have a color television, for example, whereas people barely have running water and they have dirt floors in Venezuela. Why don't you use that money to help your own people? But that's not what they say. They join in the chorus and they blame the conservative side of the United States for being stingy with taxpayers' dollars, and they want the U.S. taxpayer to pay everybody's heating bill, I guess, among other things.
But Steve Oliveira says American critics of the Venezuelan-funded activities in the South Bronx need to pay closer attention to their own backyard.
I would say to them, maybe you should be more American and start saying, what can I do for America, for this side of America, rather than paying a blind eye while you're going from point A to point B.
Venezuela's ambassador agrees that attitudes in America towards helping the poor need to change. And he's hopeful that one day the US government will follow the Venezuelan example.
Latin America has already changed. What we need now is the US adjusting its vision and its policies towards the region, a region that has already changed.
While many Americans might prefer to forget or ignore the problems faced by the residents of the South Bronx, few can deny the effect that Venezuelan money has had on this poor community.
You're learning real skills, you're doing real work, and in case of the environmental science aspect, you're actually improving your community. Not only for the plants and animals, but for the people as well, to have just a better quality of life. And I think that's really important.